We are back. You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington. Joining me today, it's Mr. Kevin Durso. How you doing, buddy?
Good, Kyle. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's good to have you back on the show. That show a couple weeks ago was a lot of fun. And got good feedback, and, we figured we'd have you on at least one more time.
Sounds great. It was a lot of fun doing it that first time around, so definitely excited to be back.
Yeah, and I'm definitely excited to talk to you about a big Flyers week. Won 3 straight, 4 out of the last 5, points in all 5, and we'll get into that in just a second. But before that, you can find the show on Twitter at YWT Podcast. Side note, you can also find Mike at Mike_Giletto and Kevin at Kevin_Durso, DURSO. You can also find the show on Facebook, Instagram, Podbean, iTunes, Google Podcast, and sportstalkphilly.com. All right, now, I kind of said it already, but the Flyers are on a little bit of a roll here.
Yeah, they really are, and it's to see them put together points in a lot of games in a row like this is a big deal to start the season. It's not something that people are overly used to over the last 4 or 5 years, and to get on a roll like that early is where you need to be. You don't want to be chasing the season. It's what they've done in a lot of years past. It's become a regular thing, and it's not only that they're putting together points on a regular basis, they're doing it against a lot of good teams, a lot of teams people think should be playoff teams. And when you can compete with playoff teams in the league, you start to establish yourself as one of those good teams also. So maybe that's the start of something. It's a little too early. It's still too early to tell with this team. I think we can kind of agree on the fact that when you can go from one stretch where you lose 3 in a row or 4 in a row and then come back with 3 in a row or whatever, that there's still too much inconsistency. But this is a step in the right direction, and it's not like out of these 5 games, just because it takes shootouts or because it takes overtime to win these games, you don't want to create a habit of that as the season goes on, but I don't think there's anything wrong with being able to just string together positive results early in the year. It still establishes yourself as a potential good team in this league. So I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm even fine with the idea, all right, there's 1 loss out of the last 5 games and it's a shootout loss to Toronto. All right, those happen, but it's a good step in the right direction.
For sure. And like you said, at this point in the season, it's all about accumulating points, and you've gotten 9 out of the last 10 possible points. If it's a little too early to play the if the season ended today game, but if the season ended today, the Flyers are in a playoff position.
Yeah, for sure.
They're currently sitting in the first wild card spot. Everyone's played a little bit of a different number of games. Toronto's played 18, the Flyers have played 16, so it hasn't really settled itself out yet. But you've gotten points in 4 out of the last 5, and you beat a Montreal team who just missed the playoffs last year. You beat a Devils team who's a lot better than the Devils team was last year. You beat Carolina, who made the Eastern Conference Finals and then got better over the summer. A lot of people would say. You beat a Toronto team last night that on paper should be a top 5 team in the league. Like you said, it's not just about the 2 points. You're not beating up on LA and Ottawa and these kind of bottom of the barrel teams. You're beating quality competition. And that continues, we're recording Sunday morning. This podcast will be out Sunday night. It continues tonight against the Boston Bruins. They're a very good team, maybe the best in the league right now, maybe the early front runners for the President's Trophy. And if you can get a point out of them tonight, or, even if you can go into Boston and beat them, you start putting together a pretty impressive resume here in mid-November.
Yeah, you do. And, here's the thing about some of those teams that they've just played over the course of the last week and a half. You're catching New Jersey at a time, this is over a week ago, obviously, but you're catching New Jersey at a time when maybe they're not quite all together with it. Maybe they're in a little bit of a downward spin just for, and it happens. Teams go through those stretches. Carolina's been on a really bad losing streak right now. They not only lost to the Flyers, but they're losing games to Ottawa, things like that. That's not customary for Carolina by any stretch.
No, definitely not.
The game that actually probably impressed me the most out of this was the Montreal game because I looked at that Montreal game, and as I'm watching the Flyers essentially dominate play for the better part of 2.5 periods of that game, I thought back to the previous 2 days, and I go, the Flyers have beaten Carolina, and Montreal went out and beat Boston in regulation. And I'm like, as I'm watching, I'm going, that's the same team that just beat Boston in regulation? It doesn't seem like that. And Montreal was getting overpowered by the Flyers forechecking. It was, in my mind, it was the best I've seen the Flyers play from a forechecking standpoint the entire year. And that was more impressive to me than catching Carolina in a losing streak, or, even Boston when they play Boston tonight. It's Boston's coming off of 2 losses in a row that
right.
Against teams you wouldn't expect it to happen. They lose to Montreal, and maybe that happens. It's a rivalry game. Montreal probably gets up for something like that, but then they go out and they lose again, and they don't just lose. They don't just lose to any team. They lose to Detroit. You wouldn't expect them to lose to Detroit. That's the thing. So it's kind of a weird place for the Flyers to be going in, because it's the back end of a back-to-back. That's difficult. Boston's got a lethal first line. Everybody knows it. They are certainly right up there among the top 3 to 5 teams in the league, pretty much on a regular basis. And yet, and you would think that that's a team with 2 losses in a row to teams that you didn't really think they would lose to in Montreal and Detroit. They're going to be highly motivated to come out and play much better than they do. And they're ridiculous on home ice. They haven't lost in regulation on home ice yet this year. All of those things go against the Flyers in that sense. And yet there's still this sense that the Flyers come in on a roll. They come in with points in 5 straight. They come in winning 4 of their last 5. 2 out of the 5 are wins in shootouts, which is even uncharacteristic. It's all sorts of things like that. And this is one of those games that's a marker for me. This is going to tell me a whole lot about this team. The back-to-back, playing a team like Boston, playing them on the road, knowing that they come in with a lot to prove because of the 2 losses earlier this week. You come in on a roll. If you can find a way to come out, I agree with you. If you come away with it with 1 point, that's significant enough. But
you feel great.
You probably feel great doing that in the back-to-back. And, I agreed with something that was said by the guys on the post-game show on NBC Sports Philly last night. That was, when you win the first game of a back-to-back, some of the pressure's off a little bit on the second night, because you already established that you were getting 2 out of 4 out of the back-to-back. Then you feel better about the fact that maybe it takes overtime and you don't win in overtime, or you don't win in a shootout, but you got 3 out of 4 points doing that, and you come away with feeling pretty successful about your weekend. And I think that that's where the Flyers are. Maybe they can come in and play a fairly loose game and continue to play, and loose in the sense that they're comfortable. They feel confident, relaxed and confident in where they are right now, but tight in the sense that they're able to be the good, hard checking team that we've seen throughout the entire course of this week. They're able to maintain that. And look, they've had moments. I thought there were moments in the Carolina game where they didn't play their best and they kind of had to go through survival, and it happens. Same thing with the Toronto game. I thought most of the second period and the start of that third period were not very good for the Flyers, and then they tightened up in the late third period. They were the ones getting more chances. And then overtime was as 3-on-3 overtime can be. It was wide open. So, and with Toronto's speed, that's never a combination that you want to have. And again, you survive that and you find a way to come away with the second point in the shootout. So it all works out in that sense, and it's been an impressive start to impressive week. And you can start off this second week that's going to be really, really a good test for where this team is. I look at the week ahead, not only the Boston game tonight, but Washington, the Islanders again. This is a great chance to show where you are right now, and you've already done a pretty good job of it by beating teams like Carolina, Montreal, and Toronto, but you can really double down on it, and let's face it, they come away with enough points out of this particular week. We're not talking about them being currently in a playoff position as a wild card. They're probably in the top 3 in the Metro if they come away with enough points this week. So that'll establish yourself. It really will. So I think you go back to that first meeting with the Islanders 2 weeks ago and look at how they were pretty outmatched against the Islanders that first time around, outmatched against Pittsburgh with the way that they were playing, and since then it's been kind of a bit of a different story. And you can put a good finishing touch on this going into that. You're going into the final 2-3 weeks here before that marker on the regular season that people talk about so much. Getting to Thanksgiving in a playoff position is really everything. And you're getting closer to that point and you're where you want to be. That's pretty much where you are right now, and it's a good thing. It's a good place to be.
Yeah, for sure. And we talked about, winning 4 out of the last 5, getting points in the last 5. And a big part of that has been Carter Hart. And he had been struggling a little bit up to then. He had some poor starts. He had given up some goals. He had, not really looked like, the Carey Price heir apparent that, he's been billed to be for a very long time. And then this week, he kind of figured it back out. And I personally think that the young goalie broke out of the little slump he was in. And there was talk, I heard the word bust floating around because Flyers Twitter is ridiculous and Flyers Facebook might be even worse. But then, he has, 3 good starts this week and he's back and all of that disappears and he's back to being the starting goalie for the next decade and, the best goalie we've had since Hextall and whatever you want to say. So it's really encouraging to me that Carter Hart did figure it out, because last year he came in and there were expectations, but there were no expectations for last season in particular, and then he just played fantastic. So then coming into this season, obviously expectations were high. He started out pretty well, big shutout in the home opener, the real home opener, and after that, it kind of fell apart for a little bit, and Brian Elliott started winning some starts back and getting some ice time, and Carter Hart kind of fell to the wayside and had to figure it back out. But sitting here on November 10th, 2019, it certainly seems like he has figured it out, and we'll see him in Boston tonight. So we talked about back-to-back. I think the Flyers are better set up for a back-to-back than a lot of teams. You look at Toronto, who had to play Michael Hutchinson several times last month and situations like that. And the Flyers got to play Brian Elliott last night, and they might be playing their better goalie tonight on the second half of a back-to-back. And that just has so much value in it, especially when you're going up against a team with the firepower that Boston has.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll take both of your points here and kind of roll with it here, because let's start with Carter Hart. I thought, first of all, I thought that the shootout win in New Jersey was everything for him at that time. He absolutely needed that win, and to get it in that sense, because the shootout puts all the attention on the goaltender. At that point, you have to be the focal point, and in situations where you've got to come up with that big save, and he comes up with 2, Couturier is able to score in the third round, and now you need one more save, and it's on Taylor Hall, who... let's put it this way, as far as I'm concerned, finally found a way to score on him, because he had enough scoring chances in that first game in the home opener. He finally finds a way to score on him in the third period. Something. And you would think that this guy's going to be able to find a way in the shootout, too. He's one of the more skilled players in the league, obviously. Yeah. So for Carter Hart to make that save and to get that win at that time, that's huge for his confidence right there. Then he goes out and he plays Carolina and Montreal. And I asked him after the Carolina game, because that was a game where they got off to a little bit of a slow start in front of him. He faced a lot of shots early. And I asked him, do you think it's better for you to face a lot of shots early on in the game? And he said, yeah, maybe. It helps kind of get into rhythm a little bit more and you're locked in a little bit faster. He agreed with that, and that's what I certainly saw in that Carolina game. You got the sense in that Carolina game fairly early that he was locked in, he was ready to go, and it was going to be that kind of night. The Montreal game was a little different because, that was one where the Flyers controlled play so much that Carey Price was the story in goal, not Carter Hart. Not that Carter Hart didn't played a bad game. He played a perfectly sound game. It's just when more of the chances are coming at the other side, you focus on the goaltender that's made all of those saves, not the one who made 22 or 24 or whatever the number was.
Relatively low danger saves, right?
And that too. The 2 goals that he did allow in that game, the one was on a rebound, actually a really good rebound chance that Ben Sherratt put in, because puck's not even on the ice as far as I can tell watching that replay. He kind of bats it out of midair, and
that was
barely
ridiculous.
midair, and puts it in. And the one on Shea Weber, I actually turned around and I tweeted out after that goal was on Carter Hart, but not for the shot. It's the play behind the net where he turns the puck over. Right. That sets up the scoring chance. I don't think anybody's stopping a shot like that from Shea Weber anyway. No. But you want to prevent the turnover. And if there's one area that I've seen where Carter Hart kind of struggles a little bit, it is in the puck control behind the net. So you kind of wanted to see him not make that play with a little bit more conviction. And he doesn't quite do it just yet sometimes. He has that area where he falters. Now, shifting over to Brian Elliott, I thought Brian Elliott was the story of the game last night. I think he was absolutely the story of the game. All those saves in overtime were incredible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then to win in a shootout, you got to give him credit for the game against Toronto a week ago as well, because he gave him a chance to win that one too, especially in the shootout. He gave him a chance to win. And at this point, that's all you can ask from your number two guy, but
he's 1A,
he's your
1A,
it's a 1A 1B situation, and I think the Flyers have a lot of confidence in putting him in net whenever they have to. I think that's been established very early from the fact that, look at some of the games that he did win when Carter Hart wasn't quite on top of it or whatever. You had to put him in certain situations. You played him against Vegas. He wins that one. You kind of start to roll with him, at that point. You put him in against, he played against Chicago. He played, he plays against a lot of those, and a lot of those games. And you finally started to have to realize that you had to shift back to Carter Hart when things against the Islanders didn't go well, and things against Pittsburgh didn't go well. And you realized at that point, all right, let's get him back in. He's had more than enough practice time. Let's get him back in. And that's why that win in New Jersey was so big. That's the first shot he gets to go back in following a third period relief appearance in Pittsburgh. He goes in, he wins the game. You knew you were giving him the night off against Toronto, which is fine. And then, same thing, Carolina, Montreal. Good, successful games. He's got a chance to build on that against Boston tonight. And it wouldn't shock me if he doesn't, he probably gets the start against Washington, I would imagine. And
depending on how tonight goes, sure.
Yeah, depending on how tonight goes. But then, again, I would think that you'd probably play Brian Elliott against Ottawa on Friday and give Carter Hart the home game against the Islanders. That'd be my guess. But
I have a hypothetical for you.
Sure.
You're Alain Vigneault. It's day one of the playoffs. Two-part question. Who's your starting goalie, and how long of a leash does that goalie have?
The second part of the question is tougher, I would say. It's more. That's the more interesting question. If I'm Alain Vigneault and it's day one of the playoffs and I got to pick a guy for game one, it's Carter Hart. I don't even have to think about that.
Now, if you lose like the Flyers lost to the Penguins in game one of that playoff series last year, where you kind of go down 7-2 or whatever the final of that game was, does Brian Elliott start game two, or how long is the leash on Carter Hart if you're starting him in game one of the playoff series?
I think the leash is as long as he wants to allow it to be, and I know that sounds like a weird answer, but I'll say it like this: if the body language and the foundation of the fundamentals is good on Carter Hart, and you lose 7-0 or 7-1 like they did in Pittsburgh a couple weeks ago, I don't know that I fault the goaltender on that, and I say I'm still throwing him back out there for game two because he did nothing wrong, and I'm putting the onus on the rest of the team. Be better in front of your goaltender. If I'm watching what I started to see for Carter Hart in some of those other games, though, where something just looks a tick off. I don't know what it is. It's a little positioning. It's a little bit of tracking. It's a little bit of all the things that make him a really good, potentially great goaltender. Then I'm concerned, and then I sit there and I go, well, maybe I have to pull back, and we're in a playoff picture, and I don't want to put him out there, knowing that he could use the practice time and try to work on those fundamentals. And the way that the playoff structure works, knowing that you're going to get one day off between games in one city, then probably two off before you play a home game or an away game or whatever the situation is based on where you're seated. Based on where you're seated. Knowing that he would have the extra practice time, because at that point in time, you're pretty much practicing every single day from there. So because of that, all right, game one doesn't go so well. You get the practice time in before game two. You sit out game two. Use the extra, use the morning skate time to your advantage. Get 2 more days off in between where you get to practice. Then you get game 3. Now I gave you 4 days time to work on those fundamentals and get it figure out whatever was going on. And, I think the interesting thing about that question is you mentioned it being for a playoff series. The playoffs being as far away as they are right now. The fact it is, but the fact that he's gone through this once and, all right, maybe it took about a week and a half before he was back in as the starting goalie, and it worked out, Look at the separation between those two games we're talking about. He started the game against the Islanders, gets pulled in that game. It's, another time when he gets pulled. He had been pulled previously a few weeks back in Edmonton. That wasn't a fun night for him either, obviously.
No, that wasn't a fun night for anybody.
Right, and then you go, okay, he sits out the Pittsburgh game until the third period when you finally felt the need to make a change because it was 6-0 at that point.
All right, you're just hanging him out to dry then.
And 5 days later, he's back as your starting goalie. I don't see any reason why, if he can't figure it out in that time frame at the beginning of a season, that when the playoffs roll around, if you had to do that for one game and you were able to give him 3 days in between to do practice time and work hard on some things, that he wouldn't be able to figure it out. I think that that would be the time frame that would be perfect for him, and it's good to see that he's able to figure it out in that sense this early in the year, because you know that you can give him that spell if he needs to. You know, if you need him to work on some things, he figures it out. He comes away with, you know, the time that he needs to get back to the fundamental shape he's in. And look, I think that once he got that win, I don't think it was a perfectly fundamental game from him in New Jersey, but it certainly looked like that against Carolina, and it certainly looked like that against Montreal, and that's the Carter Hart that people have come to know already.
Absolutely. It does wonders for your confidence, and you do also have the luxury of a competent backup. Brian Elliott is more than capable of coming in and winning you a playoff game, or coming in relief and, you know, letting Carter Hart go, you know, take his little mental break, or something along those lines. He's done it all in this league, and he's beyond the point where he should be playing 55, 60 games a season, but he's a perfectly serviceable backup, and the fact that he could come in, he came in and played well while Carter was in his little funk, and it allows... It puts the team in a position where they can allow Carter Hart to work his issues out, and they don't have to rush him back in the net and play him 35 games in a row and, oh, he'll figure it out. We need him to figure it out. You can play Brian Elliott, and Carter Hart can go figure it out on his own, and when he comes back, he's going to be Carter freaking Hart.
Yeah, and confidence is everything for him, and here's what I'll say about that, though, too. I'm at pretty much every home game. We've talked about this before with, you know, with what I'm doing and my outlets. Yes. I know. But I didn't go to a home game that he started for a good 2 weeks. His last home start before Carolina was Dallas.
Okay.
Way back. Brian Elliott had the Vegas game. He had the Columbus comeback game. He had the Toronto shootout loss. And I don't know that I necessarily noticed anything after that Dallas game with Carter Hart, but I can tell you now that after these last two, at least at home, he's got that confident feeling back behind him just from when he comes into the locker room after a game. It's the persona is completely different. His personality, it's not that it changes when he loses a game. It's just, you know, you can tell how much he wants to win. And when he knows that he's given his team the best he can give, and you sit there and you go, all right, 1 goal allowed against Carolina, there was a possibility that it could have been challenged for goalie interference. He gets his stick knocked out of his hands. He didn't think about it like that. He goes, I didn't think about reacting to it like that until way after the fact. But he kind of brushes the 1 goal aside and looks at the fact that in the third period, the whole team played better. He helps as a part of that as well. And you move on from that, and he takes the confidence that he got to win. He looks at the Montreal game, and I actually really liked this because in a game where he was not necessarily the story when it came to goalies, like I said,
right,
he does take the fact that he goes, you know, the last time I had to play Carey Price, it didn't go so well, you know, and he got pulled, and he laughed about it. He actually was able to laugh about it and go, you know, it didn't go so well the last time, so this was pretty fun, and it was much better this time around than it was the first time. So there's that element of growth as well, that he can look. I don't know too many goalies that I can recall anyway with this team that are willing to point out last time.
Right.
That go back to, especially a game that far into the past. You know, that was was last February. That was in last season. And he goes back and he pulls that one out of the memory bank and is able to sit there and go, you know, when I played Carey Price the last time, it didn't go so well. So I'm looking at this. He knows, but I don't know many who were willing and confident enough to bring it up.
Right. Well, and outlets, media outlets always make a big deal about Carey Price and Carter Hart playing, and Carey Price, you know, Carter Hart looked up to him, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And this was the first time Carter Hart got the better of his idol, mentor, whatever you want to call it. This is the first time that Carter Hart got the better of Carey Price. So I'm sure that the previous interactions, I'm not going to say they weighed on him, but I'm sure he knows. He's aware. You know, we think of these players as, you know, machines who just play the game. They know the history. They know. Carter Hart knows that he hadn't beaten Carey Price yet. And, you know, it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is getting the 2 points. but he's aware that
Sure.
that's a big deal for him, and that's the first time he's beaten Carey Price.
Yeah, and there's an element of goaltender to goaltender. There's an element of sympathy to the way that game ended. I was walking toward the elevator to go down from the press box to the locker room, and I'm walking and I'm going, of all the ways that Carey Price loses this game. And it's not on him to lose the game, I'm saying, but I'm looking at it and I'm going, of all shots, it's a harmless looking shot. It leaks through. That's the last way you would have expected this game to end. Maybe the way a leaky goal goes in is maybe if it goes to a shootout and you find a way to do it, but not in overtime, not through a screen, not on a shot that's from essentially the high slot. It's not even like it was really in tight. And that's the one that gets through and finds a way to give the Flyers the win. And I think as a young goalie, even with the lack of experience that Carter Hart has as compared to Carey Price, there's still a sympathy to the way that game ended.
Oh, of course.
Carter Hart knows that that's not the way that Carey Price wants a game to end. He feels like he should have made that save. And I obviously, when I go downstairs after a game, I'm in the Flyers side of it. I'm not really going. I just get the transcripts of what happens in the other locker room. Carey Price was not in a talkative mood after that game, and you can understand why.
Oh, you can't blame him.
You can't blame him for playing as well as he did, having to kind of stand on his head for most of the game, and then that one goes in, and he probably feels a lot of responsibility for that one going in because it's a save he makes 99 times out of 100.
It's a softer goal than Carey Price usually lets up.
And that's the one that goes in and wins the game. The Flyers certainly will take it. Carter Hart's happy that he gets a win out of that, but he also, I do think that there's such a maturity with him that there's also that sympathy that you go, that's never one you want to allow. It's not the way you want to lose a game, and if it was the other way around, I would be feeling the same way. And that's such a great way for him to look, and it's, again, that's just a way that he's so beyond his years. I think every time
he's very mature.
Every time I talk to him, I'm always amazed at how you don't think of him as a 21-year-old. You just don't.
No, he doesn't look like a kid who's played less than 50 NHL games. He looks like a Carey Price in terms of just how he carries himself and how he behaves off the ice and how seriously he takes the game. He looks like a 10-year vet, and it's incredible to say. But you mentioned that you've been at all the Flyers home games, and I do actually want to talk about that for a minute because I don't know if you've looked at this, but the Flyers are 6-1-1 at home. Now they're 3-4-1 away, so below 500, but not terrible. But 6-1-1 at home. How much of that is Alain Vigneault having a little bit more control? How much of that is actual home ice? What do you think's going into that record for the Flyers?
I don't know if there's any one particular thing, quite honestly. I obviously home teams get the advantage of being able to match up better. You get the last change. That plays a factor, but it's not something that I think has been overly noticeable. I think that more than anything, what they do at home is not really all that different from what they do on the road, other than maybe getting some of those matchups every now and then. And I don't think they do anything differently at home to take advantage of the matchups. I think that just they don't get the matchups they want when they're on the road, and it comes back to haunt them in certain occasions. I think it's been a lot better lately. The last two road games have been very solid road games. Toronto and New Jersey, I think they've both been really solid road games. Two of those road games are not very good. A few of the other road games that they've lost are a result of more, the early season crazy travel than it was necessarily being the fact that they were just on the road. You change things when you play a back-to-back like they did a week ago, when it's just make a trip to New Jersey and then go play Toronto at home. That's a very different kind of back-to-back than here's a road trip. We've already been traveling all across Western Canada.
Europe to Western Canada
let's
to
go
Central
play Calgary
Canada.
and Edmonton back-to-back and see how that goes. And the Calgary game was just sloppy, and they probably should have played better in that one. The energy wasn't there. The Edmonton game, as we talked about, was a better energy game, but the result, you can't sometimes sustain play against the speed that Edmonton has, and that comes. And I go back to that point I made earlier in the show today. That, when you win the first game of a back-to-back, maybe some of the pressure's off and you don't feel like you're pressing as much. They lose to Calgary. Now the Edmonton game becomes everything. Not only to get points in the back-to-back, but to get more points out of the Western Canada trip. They'd only had one to that point. And that's where it kind of comes into play. That's the only other back-to-back that we can reference besides the one from a week ago
Right.
And obviously this one they're currently on, which we don't know the result of tonight's game yet, obviously. So
right, we'll see how that goes tonight.
But it's already a totally different back-to-back anyway. You got the win in Toronto. It's already a different story. It's like a week ago. If you come away with a game that goes to overtime, you feel great about that back-to-back. So in terms of playing on home ice, though, I don't know that I notice anything totally different about their energy. I mean, because they've had their games where they're not the more energetic team. Just like they've had on the road. I think the Carolina game left a lot to be desired early. They pulled it together late, and they get a win. The Columbus game, your goalie wasn't the best. Not that there was a lot he could do on some of the shots that were faced, but Columbus was really giving it to you for most of that game.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you find a way to turn up the energy level in the third period, and maybe the push was good throughout the parts of the second as well, but the results were not. And you pushed. I thought that second period against Columbus, you push. You finally get the power play that allows you to tie the game, and you go right back down the other way and give it right back. And now you're going to go into the third period trailing. And in fairness to, I think the thing about Alain Vigneault that I will say, and it's not necessarily a home or away thing, it's just a mindset thing,
right?
Is they go down to Columbus 4-2 after a bad bounce. Last year, that team folds. The team totally folds and gives it up and says, we've lost tonight, oh well.
You're probably right.
And Alain Vigneault's team didn't, in this case, does not. They continue to push. They get one. They get two. They tie the game. They
then get a total of 5.
Well, they take a penalty where you think, oh, here it comes. The comeback, that was nice. Now here comes the power play goal that sinks them. And they get a shorthanded goal instead. From Kevin Hayes.
Yeah. Yep.
And then it just continues from there. The goal by Raffl into an empty net. Konecny scores with 10 seconds left because why not?
Absolute rub-in. Oh, yeah.
Because why not? And even that back-to-back, because that was a back-to-back with a road trip after it, that was... You could accept the result a little bit, but I think you did want more out of that second game than what they were able to give. Maybe that was... And it's tough to say. Maybe that's the Islanders just being on an absolute tear at that time. Maybe it's the energy level. I don't know. But I will say this about Alain Vigneault so far. The fact that there's never a moment where you have time, I don't think there's a moment where this team should feel like they have time to take off.
Right.
I pointed out, and one of the things I point out when I watch a game like I watched last night, where I'm watching from home and I'm not there, because when I'm there, obviously I hear this, but I can hear it when I'm at home too, watching on TV. And that's the fact that if you see any transition play, you listen closely, you can hear a kind of squealing voice, and you know whose voice it is. And you can hear him telling him, get back in it, speed, move, do this. You're hearing commands. And you're hearing commands that are just, they're not about do this or do that, or it's not kind of specific instruction. It's all centered around the same thing. Move your feet, hustle, play with speed, do it like this. That kind of instruction and that kind of emphasis from a head coach is something that hasn't been there for so long. And lo and behold, it's working. That's the thing I think that people should be excited to see. It's working. This guy has a plan, and it's not just having a plan from a system standpoint, because there's a lot of similarities with this year's team to last year's team in certain ways. There's still breakdowns. They're still young. They're still going to make mistakes. There's still trouble with breakouts sometimes and turnovers, and that stuff happens over the course of a game no matter how good you are. But it still happens with a little bit too much regularity for this team. That being said, from a coaching standpoint, the fact that you can make up for a lot of those things by just playing fast and thinking fast, and they are doing that, and that's what's so impressive. I watched some of that in the Toronto game last night. That first goal, it's a transitional rush. You make a couple quick plays, bring a trailer into it, take a perfect shot, get a goal. That's how that has to work sometimes, and transition plays are everything. And what I've liked about the transition plays is not capitalizing off of them. It's being able to defend them better. I think they've been much better. How many odd man rushes did they give up a year ago where you go, yeah, here it comes, and you felt like the result was known before they even crossed the blue line.
The second the play starts, it's ended up in the net.
And just knowing Toronto's speed that makes it so impressive. They did get burned by a couple transition plays at home against Toronto. The Marner goal that ties the game back up in the third period, that's one that I think of. And that didn't. I don't remember seeing that much in that
No.
game last night. You know, I think it's amazing that they've played 2 games against Toronto and Austin Matthews doesn't have a goal. He has points. He doesn't have a goal, though.
Right.
That's pretty impressive. You held, you didn't have to play John Tavares a week ago. You play him last night. Didn't see him much,
He was pretty irrelevant. Yeah.
Exactly. I don't want to, I can't single out Marner in this case because Marner did score in the first game and didn't play for the last
He did
half
also
of the
leave,
second.
late in the first, or was it early in the second?
It happened right off the opening face-off.
Okay.
Of the second period.
The second period,
and
right.
He took 1 or 2 more shifts while they had a power play because that was the first
one more shift.
And what I remember is he took a shift. He actually was involved in one play that led to a face-off, and right off the next face-off fell over with completely unprompted and went straight off the ice at that point.
I haven't heard a diagnosis, but they're fearing that it's serious. And I don't know if you saw the slow motion. But his knee and ankle both twisted in a way that shouldn't. I
don't know if I saw that slow motion. What I did get afterwards is he's not making a trip to Chicago on Sunday night for their game. No. Mike Babcock was kind of very vague about it because he said it could be days, could be weeks. But the fact that he's not making a trip tells me it's not necessarily a day-to-day thing. It might be a week-to-week thing. And just, he tried to come back midway through the game, midway through that period. He made it back to the bench, kind of took a twirl in between commercials, and tried to see if he could give it a go, and left almost immediately. So at that point, he was done for the night, and that's certainly a big loss for Toronto, no doubt about it. But then again, Toronto won a game in Philadelphia without John Tavares and Jake Muzzin, and that's for sure 2 significant losses as well. So I don't really look. Marner's a great, skilled young player, but Nylander had a solid game. For not getting any points last night, I thought Kasperi Kapanen had another really good game on his up on his skates. Always the speedy guy that he is, and always dangerous because of that speed. And once Marner left, his role was elevated as well. He jumped up to that second line, and that was that makes him even more dangerous. Andreas Janssen was dangerous last night, and had a lot of good scoring chances. All those things, I think to be able to compete with that speed to nullify a lot of their transitions. And they got their share. They got, by my count, I believe it was 3 odd man rushes in overtime.
They had their chances for sure. Brian Elliott played really well. But I think there's an element of recovery when your goalie can make a save there on those on a 2-on-1 in overtime like that. He makes a couple of saves, but I don't remember there being a great, there's rebounds there, but I don't remember there being a great rebound chance. Probably the best rebound chance he had was the one at the very end of the game. Tavares takes a backhander, Nylander standing at the side of the net, and Elliott gets his blocker on it to get it up over the net before, to send it to a shootout. That was probably the best rebound chance that I saw on any of the odd man situations, or, something like that where it was a brief 7-second power play chance, and lo and behold, they win the faceoff and they get 2 scoring chances with the ability to win it. And I went back and I had to check, but I really wanted to make sure, just to be sure, Nylander's shot would have counted if it goes in. There was a good from the release that I had, there was a good 0.7 seconds left on the clock when it hits Elliott, not even when the shot's taken. Right. It hits off of Elliott's blocker, goes up over the net, and there was still 0.7 left as they waited to find out where it went, and it hits the netting and comes back down, and the time's out by that point. But yeah, and the Flyers did get a couple good chances in overtime too. Frederik Andersen played really, really well. I'm thinking specifically of the little chip pass mini breakaway to Provorov,
which, by the way, is a brilliant play by Kevin Hayes.
Incredible play by Kevin Hayes. Kevin Hayes, I've said it before on this show, and I'm going to say it again. There was a lot of flack given to that contract for money, for length, for that 3-year no-move clause or no trade or whatever it is. There's a lot of flack. He's a 50-point guy, blah, blah, blah. Kevin Hayes is really good at hockey.
He is, and here's what I'll say, and I'll tie this into what we were talking about with Alain Vigneault as well.
Right.
When he plays a game throughout the course of this week, I don't remember if it was, I think it was the Tuesday game against Carolina. I'm taking a guess on that off the top of my head, but I think it was this one. And Alain Vigneault's not afraid to mention, here's a guy we need a little more from. And he did with Kevin Hayes and Jake Voracek on that line. Carson Twarynski got moved to that line, and he liked the effort from him. It wasn't necessarily a game where the other two were as good as they could be, and I think that still continued over the course of the rest of the week to an extent. Especially, I don't think Kevin Hayes is lighting it up offensively by any stretch, and he wasn't expected to, but I do think there's a little more to be desired in that area. That being said, from a defensive standpoint, he's as solid as they come right now.
He's been incredible.
He's been excellent defensively. And some of his decisions with the puck in his own zone have been really impressive to me. That's what I've liked more. I do think there's a lot to be... And granted, there's a lot to be desired offensively, but look at how they're playing him right now, and that's not the way they were supposed to be playing him, if you think about it. He's technically playing a third line role when he was signed on to be the second line center, and you're doing that because the uncertainty of the injury to Nolan Patrick, the timeline that you have to face with Scott Lawton for right now changes the dynamic. So you move Giroux back to center. Surprisingly enough, I recall a couple games last year where Dave Haxtell tried that to generate more offense, and it didn't work. Sure enough, this is working for Alain Vigneault. Giroux at center with the guys he's playing with has worked. It's not a perfect line by any stretch, but it's a line that's efficient enough. I'll say it's not great, but it's good enough. It's hard to sit there and call it. I don't know that we can sit there and identify a 1, 2, or 3. Well, I don't want to say it like that. We can identify a 1. I don't know if we can identify a 2 or a 3.
No, and that's a good thing. The fact that the Flyers have this depth to roll out Oskar Lindblom, JVR, Jake Voracek, Travis Konecny. These are all your wingers, and it really doesn't matter who they're playing with. Mm-hmm. As far as I'm concerned, Travis Konecny is having a great season. So is Oskar Lindblom. Michael Raffl's been stellar on the fourth line. Tyler Pitlick's been stellar on the fourth line. We had a couple of phantoms cycle in and out. We saw Andy Andreoff for the first time last night against Toronto.
I thought he had a good game last night, too.
He definitely played well. The fact that the Flyers have this much depth is encouraging because 3 years ago it was Claude, Jake, Wayne, and that was kind of it. Coots hadn't broken out yet, and Ghost was having a down year. And the fact that we've come all this way, and just the offensive production from 10 or 11 of your 12 forwards, on any given night, you can expect Michael Raffl to be involved in a play, or Tyler Pitlick to be involved in a play, and that's something I haven't seen from this team in a very long time. And that's really, really encouraging for me. And Tyler Pitlick played a great game last night. I noticed him multiple times really well. But, even a little higher up in the lineup, Lindblom and Konecny look like stars. Maybe not superstars, but they look like they could make an all-star game one day. They look like, in the old 5-on-5 all-star game system, they're shoo-ins. The 3-on-3, Travis Konecny probably gets there at some point, but it's great to see. I'm not going to lie. And then we do have a little bit of center depth to put with them.
Yeah, I think you just touched on almost every single point I made in my post-game observations. Like, you really went through all of them. I don't even know which one I'll start. I guess I'll start with I think I called them. I put it as a question mark, and I went dynamic duo, because how many times have Travis Konecny and Oskar Lindblom teamed up on goals this year?
They're joined at the hip.
It's very frequent. I loved what Alain Vigneault said after one of the games this week. I think it was Tuesday also, talking about that line in general. And I got to admit, I find it amazing that when we talk about that line, I think we talk more right now about Konecny and Lindblom, and we're leaving out Sean Couturier, who was probably by far the best Flyer forward last year. And
put a pin in Sean Couturier, because I do want to talk about his injury, but you can continue your point. I'm sorry.
Oh, sure. But the fact that those two just have such great chemistry together. And Alain Vigneault sat there and stood there on Tuesday after that game at the press conference and flat out said, I have no intentions of breaking that lineup at all right now.
Why would you?
And obviously, it sounds like an obvious statement, but at the same time, you never know what a coach is thinking in terms of how can I maximize production. Yes, they're good together, but I could.
Maybe they'll be better separate.
Right, but I could give blank more minutes, or I could put this one against better matchups.
With Konecny,
something, anything like that. And I think that was almost an overthinking of Dave Haxtell in years past, where it was, maybe we're overthinking this process and let's put them, I think, let's do it with the Giroux Voracek situation. I can put them together, we'll get more production. If I split them up, it gives, maybe it's better matchups.
We get two lines, right?
Right. We have 2 lines of depth, maybe. Whatever. There's a way to overthink that, and overthinking it right now would be changing anything about that line. That's overthinking it. They go out, they play well every single night. Konechny's been the most consistent player on the team, in my opinion. Lindblom's not far behind. And the two of them just work so well together. The thing about that play in particular from last night's game is the fact that Konechny's not really looking at Lindblom in that situation. He's looking at Couturier, he's looking at the net. You're thinking, is it a shot? Is it a pass towards the slot where Couturier is going to get the deflection? What's the play? And then he totally turns the tables and goes, let's go down low at the side of the net to Oskar Lindblom. And Lindblom standing there with the stick on the ice, ready to make the tip. It actually, I caught a much slower replay of it. You almost don't realize it hits the stick and then his shin pad and makes that. That's how it makes sharp left turn and goes into the net. I didn't know
it did that.
The cameras that got it were not, I don't know if they were the NBC cameras. I think it was the Sportsnet, the Hockey Night in Canada cameras got it.
Okay.
And you see it turn twice. It makes two different redirections off of them. And then, but at the same time also shoots upward so that Anderson has no play on that. It's an impossible one to stop when it turns that way and goes in. And still, though, the fact that he's not looking that way but has him there as an option, I mean, let's put it this way. They teamed up for a goal in Vancouver. They teamed up for a goal in Chicago. I believe a couple of Konechny, those are just Lindblom's goals, by the way. Lindblom scoring all of those goals. There's been goals where Konechny finishes off of one, I believe. They teamed up, and it was a collective effort with Couturier involved, but they teamed up for one against New Jersey. It's happening frequently that they go in and do this.
For the record, I didn't know either Flyers goal went in last night. Myers off the back bar and out right away, and then Lindblom at an absolutely impossible angle. JJ didn't know that Myers scored. He's like, it hits the post. Oh, wait, they say it's in. It was incredible. And then Lindblom was something similar. I saw the puck miss wide right, and then all of a sudden it's in the net, and the light's on.
Lindblom's I could see went in. Right, and maybe I don't know if it's maybe it's an angles thing. Maybe it's the way that I see it upstairs sometimes to be able to translate it. I don't know.
Myers, I had no clue.
Myers, I even said out loud, "Oh, he hit the post," and then I'm looking, and I looked up, and I didn't even wait for Jim Jackson to say that it was in.
It was in.
I actually looked up and I saw the official point and went, "Oh, wait, it's in."
The ref knew right away,
and I'm like, "Oh, they're saying it's in." Okay, let's So that was the deal with that, and what a shot that was too. So the two goals, really nice goals, both of them.
As much grief as people give NHL officials, the fact that he saw that net move a little tiny bit because it hit the bar, that's an insane call. The fact that he saw that is ridiculous.
I was trying to figure out who the other official was because I know Wes McCauley was one of them. Wes McCauley's one of the best in the business. Francois Saint Laurent was also one of the officials in last night's game. It's a pretty good team. They're two vets, and when particularly for I say this about Wes McCauley all the time. Whenever I see that he's officiating a game in Philly, outside of Philly, that the Flyers are involved in, I feel like you're going to get an honest effort every single time. You're going to get a fair game. You're going to get a well-called game. And I really legitimately think that about last night's game, not just from a standpoint of being able to see the puck go into the net in those situations where it's in and out so quickly. I didn't see one penalty call that I questioned.
Right. Every once in a while, I think Wes gets himself a little fired up about being the center of attention while he's making a call. But 99% of the time, I think he's good. I appreciate the humor. It's nice to see a little bit of personality because the NHL doesn't let their players have personality. So at least we have a ref with personality.
Well, I'll say this. Speaking of personality, though, one of the things I thought the Flyers have lacked over the years is guys who get, scoring a goal is supposed to be fun, get fired up a little bit about it or whatever.
I've seen Travis Konecny get fired up. I don't know if that's who you're talking about.
That's who I'm talking about because I'm going right back to the duo we're talking about.
The slam dunk goal, huh?
Travis Konecny acts like it's fun to score goals, and you want it to be. You know who else acts like it's fun to score goals, especially because he's new? Joel Farabee acts like it's fun to score. And yes, he's only got 2 in his NHL career, so it's not going to be something that's frequently happened for him yet, obviously. But at the same time,
I said it on this show.
Fun, yeah.
I said it on this show, and I'll say it again. Joel Farabee will be a 30-goal scorer in his career.
Probably. It wouldn't be surprising.
He just has that nose for the net.
I've loved the move to the top line for sure.
When I ran when I ran through all the wingers, I didn't even mention Farabee. And he might have been the Flyers' best winger over the last 4 or 5 games. He's been really, really good. And the fact that I don't know who's been better, him, Travis Konecny, or Oskar Lindblom, is insane to me. And none of them were on the Flyers roster 3 years ago.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
You get to a certain point, especially with somebody like Farabee, where you have to start asking yourself what the future holds for him, or you start to there's a realization, I'll say it that way. And I've come to the realization, especially, I don't know if you saw this on Tuesday. I tweeted out from my account, tweeted out, Joel Farabee's had a really strong game aside from a first period turnover and a penalty. That's it. I haven't really seen any flaw other than that. And I went, if anybody else deserves a goal from here on out, it's Farabee. This was still a 2-1 game at the time, and 2 minutes after I put that out there, he went down and he scored on his own rebound.
There you go,
and,
Nostradamus.
Well, I wasn't trying to be, honestly, but it was more or less. I think the important thing. Yeah, the important thing about that was me pointing out what a good game he's had. He deserves a goal tonight, even if he doesn't get one. He's played well enough that he should get one. He should be in a position to get one, and the more I watch him, that game in particular, there's a realization point where you go, he's not going back down. At what point do you sit there and first of all,
tell him he can buy his apartment in the city now.
Well, right,
whatever he wants to do, tell him to move in.
Last night was his 10th game, so the slide option's already out of the picture. He's on his entry level deal. That's over. Then you add in.
He's looked stellar.
Well, add in what you just said. At what point do you sit there and you tell him, go get a place? You're not going anywhere. Go get a place.
Right.
I don't see any reason why he would be going anywhere when you are easily, without, determine the lines however you want to. I think there's a clear number one, and they have, truth be told, they've been getting more minutes lately than the Giroux line.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
deservedly so.
But at the same time, it's still the top 6. And Joel Farabee is a top 6 forward on this team right now, based on how it is.
In 10 games.
Well, and let's look at kind of the irony of the situation as well, just based on the way the structure is. Because you can't deny it, Joel Farabee is playing top 6 minutes and is in a top 6 role on this team, and Kevin Hayes and Jake Voracek are not at the moment.
And that's insane.
It doesn't mean that they're not top 6 potential players. It means look what you've added by saying Farabee's ready to play at this level. You've added a guy who easily fits into your top 9, deserves the minutes that he's getting at even strength on the power play, fits the role really well. He's a tenacious little player. He really goes hard in every situation, and I had asked AV about that also on Tuesday. I asked Joel this as well. Is he able to take more chances being on a line like that as opposed to playing third line, where you're playing with guys who are maybe a little bit less skilled and you have to maybe recover defensively for that? Joel kind of said, yeah, he feels that a little bit because there's always a play to be made with the two guys. There's always a play to be made with Giroux and JVR. They're going to help set you up. Be ready to make a play, and that's where you have to be more confident and be more aggressive in your game. What Alain Vigneault said to me was a little bit different. He did not necessarily answer the question about being more aggressive and be willing to take more chances. He turned it to he's making plays on the boards, he's strong on the forecheck, he's doing all these things, and this is the exact quote that he gave me. He's one of the better players on our team right now.
Yeah, it's insane.
That's
He's been
a veteran
here for 10
head
games.
Right, and that's a veteran head coach who's looking at a group that has Claude Giroux, James Van Riemsdyk, Jake Voracek, Kevin Hayes, guys who are established veterans. Even throw Sean Couturier into it as another established veteran. That's 5 really good established veterans that you can factor in, and he's able to turn around and he goes, he's one of the better players on our team right now. What a statement to make
with him.
Yeah, I don't either. And what a statement to make about a 19-year-old kid who's had 10 at that point in time 8 NHL games.
Yep. And I'm not worried. So sometimes in a situation like this, when a young player is getting maybe more ice time than they quote unquote should be getting, a lot of times it's because of injury. But right now, that's not really the case because your injury solutions are pretty easy. When Scott Lawton comes back in a couple of weeks, a guy like Andy Andrioff comes out. And then when Nolan is up to speed and ready to go, and hopefully he's playing this year, we're still a little unsure about that. But if something like that happens, a guy like Carson Twarynski can pretty easily kind of fall out of the lineup. And if you look at the Flyers lineup right now and remove Andy Andrioff and Carson Twarynski and add in Scott Lawton and Nolan Patrick, that's a really good forward core, if you ask me.
Well, Scott Lawton then becomes your fourth line center, and that sounds
totally
ridiculous
fine.
enough as it is.
That's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's going to play any higher than that, but if he's your fourth line center with how good Michael Raffl and Tyler Pitlick have been on his wings, maybe Twarynski stays in over Pitlick, whatever. At that point, if you're nitpicking over your 12th forward, you got better problems.
Yeah.
But at that point, if you look at that lineup, when the Flyers are healthy, assuming Nolan Patrick gets healthy, knock on wood, that's a lineup that can do damage across. Because even right now, yeah, you got your first line getting more minutes than your second line, but like the top 9 is all kind of playing a pretty similar role in terms of ice time. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind, like I said, I keep harping on the depth of this team, but this team just has depth, and it's crazy to say. And when you have Michael Raffl playing, 9, 10, 12 minutes a night, whatever he's playing, and looking really, really good in that role, that allows you to roll your other 3, and then your fourth line kind of just comes and picks up the scraps.
I'll take it to another level with you, because we were talking about the fourth line earlier and how well they played last night. And for Alain Vigneault to do what he did last night, and I'll tell you where I'm going with this, is knowing you have a back-to-back and knowing you need to be as well rested as you can be for a back-to-back going to Boston. He had no choice in the middle of a tie game in the third period to continue to play the fourth line as much as possible. I'm looking right now at the ice times from last night's game, and Carson Twarynski played 12:32, and Tyler Pitlick played 11:54, and Michael Raffl played 10:54, and Andrioff played 11:14. And these are guys who you would not expect to be playing more than maybe 7 or 8 minutes a night, and they had to play at least 10, 11 minutes.
And a lot of it was in clutch situations.
And actually, in reality, Twarynski's number is actually relatively low because he's more of a third liner.
Right.
And look, some of the numbers are going to be elevated because of overtime as well. There's guys who played more in overtime. Kevin Hayes ended up being for a third line center because that's the role we assume he's in right now. Still ended up playing 20 minutes and 28 seconds, which was the second highest among forwards on the team, because of the fact that in overtime he was out there for an extended
long time,
and Giroux was out there for the same length of time, same reasoning. He's out there for the overtime more than it is. But think about that though too. Also, if it didn't take overtime and you were trying to just roll the lines, then there was no forward that plays 20 minutes, and that's not really common.
That's crazy.
There's no forward that plays 20 minutes. And you got to limit Sean Couturier to 18 minutes and 27 seconds. That normally doesn't happen. Konecny played
for a guy who's banged up.
Yeah, Konecny plays 17-16. That's pretty good. Lindblom played 17 minutes even. JVR played 15 minutes even. Those are good minutes in an effective win that you can now take with you and go to Boston and maybe be well enough at this point to be able to play with some energy there too, because they did not play the normal 20 minutes that they're used to. Even in a game where there was 65 minutes to go around, you really balanced everything out well. And the fact that you can trust the fourth line to be that makes all the difference in the world. And we talked about guys who need to try to... There's guys, they went into one game. I'm trying to remember which one specifically it was, but they went into one. Maybe it was the Toronto one coming off of New Jersey, where there was a lot of guys that were in question of being able to play. Couturier was one of them at that time. But they sat there and they said a lot of guys are possibly game time decisions. There's a lot of guys who are dealing with some small things. And to be honest, without having any names specifically mentioned, other than knowing Couturier, who had admitted about the shoulder.
Let's dive right into that.
Yeah. Who had admitted about the shoulder and how he's not able to take... He's supposed to be limited on faceoffs, and he has been for the last few games.
He has been significantly. Travis Konecny's taken a lot of draws.
Now, that being said, let's talk about Sean Couturier, because here's something I want to say about this. Since it's been made known that
Right.
he's dealing with a shoulder injury, which I think it came out after the New Jersey game that he actually admitted it.
Yeah, because at that point, about halfway through that game,
he stopped taking
face-offs.
And
I noticed it. They mentioned it on the broadcast.
Yeah.
I noticed it.
Yeah.
Like, why is Travis Konecny taking a face-off when Sean Couturier is on the ice?
Sure.
Something's wrong.
And not only that, but the shootout move he used in that one, very different from anything else. He's not able to, but and as unreal as it is, it's not the traditional shot. So it's like, it was almost like he was trying to be as deceptive as he could without taking a real shot. I'm going to put a move on, and I'm just going to tuck it in. I'm not going to take a full wrist shot here. I'm not going to try to do something with my shoulder that's going to do anything with it.
Tweak something, right?
So he admits that, and going into that, but since that point, he comes out and, just the goal in the shootout on that Friday night against New Jersey, an overtime winner against Montreal, a shootout winner in Toronto, all that.
He's just playing really good
just
hockey.
While you're trying to nurse a sore shoulder.
Right. Now, is that what it is? Is it just sore?
I believe it was like a light strain or something like that, but it was something. It's nothing major.
Nothing's torn. Nothing's broken.
Right. It's just more or less shoulder soreness, but it's in such a way that taking face-offs just prolongs the recovery process.
Right.
So if they limit him there, he's able to do everything else. And it was funny because I think it was brought up at some point in time, and it might have been in the same game where in the Montreal game where they won in overtime, and it was one of the first ones where he hadn't taken, because he still got his fair share of faceoffs in against Carolina, and he wasn't supposed to.
Right. And I think a lot of people got kicked out in Carolina. The officiating crew was pretty trigger happy on the faceoff violations.
They were, and it was becoming one of those situations where he had to step in a lot. And Alain Vigneault had even said it had to do with, once that happens, he just jumps in and goes ahead and takes the faceoff. There's no stopping him. You got the training staff telling Alain Vigneault, stop putting him out there for faceoffs. And he's going,
what am I supposed to do?
He's sitting there, he goes, I'm not lining him up for faceoffs. I'm lining him up on the wing, and when we get kicked out of a faceoff, he goes in and just takes it. What am I supposed to do? Tell him to stop? Whatever. But
like, Travis Konecny's played some center, but I'd rather have an injured Sean Couturier taking faceoffs than Oskar Lindblom, to be fair.
And so Couturier, though, to be that way, and Alain Vigneault said it after the overtime winner on Thursday. You can see he's still able to do all of the other things very well.
Yeah,
if
that's the only thing.
I can't use him for faceoffs, but he does everything else really well. So it's not
he's still a great player.
What issues do we have here? What issues are the team is the team facing because he just can't take faceoffs? Yes, he's a really great faceoff guy. He's one of the tops in the league, but. I'll say this. I was impressed by the way Konecny took faceoffs against Montreal. I don't remember what his numbers were. I didn't look at what his numbers were, I should say, from the
He never looked
Toronto
embarrassed,
game.
though.
He
never
right.
But yeah, it's like I said, Travis Konecny's played some center, but I would rather have Sean Couturier taking draws even at 75-80% than, Oskar Lindblom. But I'm a little concerned, because you play Brad Marchand tonight and Tom Wilson on Wednesday, and you got a giant target painted on one of your best center shoulders.
Potentially, yeah.
It's not impossible that one of them takes a cheap shot, and that's a little concerning. Mm-hmm. There's not much you can do about it. You're not going to hold them out of the game, but you keep your head up. Maybe play Andy Andrioff with them a little bit for some protection.
Or maybe that's when Chris Stewart gets back into the lineup for all you have him in there as a potential. I think
there's a real possibility that Chris Stewart plays tonight or Wednesday or both. But before we get out of here, I do actually want to get a prediction for tonight. So this show will come out at 8 p.m., probably after the first period. So what do you think the score will be after the first period, and then what's your score for the game? I know. I know,
man,
it's such a crapshoot. I understand.
But I'm setting myself up here, though. That's what I'm thinking. I'm going to set myself up here. You
set up a Nostradamus story earlier. Let's see if you can go 2 for 2.
I did, and I didn't. That was in the third period that I did that, though. I'd had 40 minutes. I had 40 minutes to watch Joel Farabee have a really strong game before I realized, hey, maybe he deserves a goal here. It would be nice to see him get a scoring chance, and then lo and behold, he does.
I'm gonna hit you with a hot one here while you're thinking about it.
Okay.
I think the Flyers score 3 goals in the first period, and it's 3-1 after 1.
Oh, that is a flaming hot one.
I know it's spicy, and then I think the Flyers end up winning the game 4-3.
I'm trying
3-1 after 1 and 4-3 after after the game.
Here's what I'll say about the first period, and it will set the tone for the entire game. Because
Are you going to hit the cliche of the first 10 minutes?
No, I'm not going to hit the cliche of the first 10 minutes necessarily. Here's where I'm going to go with it, though. Because it's been a trend lately, and it's been working for the Flyers. Somehow or other, I'm going to say the Flyers score the first goal in this game.
Okay, I like it.
And that sets the tone. There's a part of me that thinks at some point in this game, the Flyers, even if they score the first goal, that they trail 2-1, and I'm thinking even possibly at the end of the first period, that they trail in the game 2-1.
Okay.
I'm going to, at that point, here's what I will say about this. Boston's been a very good offensive team.
Yes.
The entire year.
Absolutely.
And that first line especially. No doubt about it. Pasternak's got 30 points. Marchand's got 28.
It's unreal.
And the team has only scored 58 goals. So you do the math yourself.
That's where all the offense is coming from.
All of your listeners out there. It's been something I've noticed about the Bruins for
Several
years and years
now. They've been a one-line team since Pasternak showed up.
And obviously one of the most important concerns about this game is if you play a game as disciplined as you played against Montreal, within reason. I'll say within reason because they got. I know there was a high stick on Ivan Provorov that they completely got away with against Montreal, and it should have been called at that stage of the game, considering the lopsided nature of the way the penalties were called, and it somehow wasn't. But even in Toronto, a fairly disciplined game, no question about it. I believe only 2 penalties during points in the game where there was actually time for Toronto to have a 2-minute power play.
Right.
One more
overtime.
too many men penalty with 7 seconds left, where they still got scoring chances, but nonetheless, it's a 7-second penalty kill.
Right.
Let's be real about that, and it counts as a full-on penalty kill. So
you win the face-off.
Toronto goes 0 for 3.
Right.
So Toronto goes 0 for 3 on the power play, and realistically, one of those is one last-second desperation chance. It's not the same thing as the other two. Regardless.
No,
Regardless, they've played really disciplined hockey for the last several games. That is the ultimate key. I actually have a weird feeling, and maybe it's the way that Boston's played the last couple of games. They're not coming in necessarily on a hot streak by any stretch. They've been mainly on a hot streak for most of the start of the season, but not necessarily this week. I have a feeling it's going to be a lower scoring game. So I'm thinking 3-2 final.
So the under is what you're saying.
I'm saying yes, I am. I am. Well, and here's the thing, too. I think you're getting 2 goalies that play particularly well. Halak's going for Boston. Carter Hart's going for the Flyers. Hart's rested from Thursday being his last game.
They've announced that Halak is going.
Yes,
okay.
they've announced Halak is going. And so Halak is potentially, he's got the ability to steal one. So I do think it's going to be a lower scoring game. I've got the weird sense that while we're on the trend of it, I think we're going to get another overtime game. So I think it's going to take that as well. It's hard for me to give a prediction on who it is. I hate to say it. I think Boston wins in overtime because Marchand is so good in the overtime, and Pasternak's been off to such a great start. I think that trio finds a way to do it. I don't want to shortchange Torrey Krug so far this season either. He's been very solid as well. So I think that trio finds a way to do it.
Yep. And like we talked about earlier, if you get a point out of it, you're not really all that upset. You got 3 out of 4 against Toronto and Boston, both road games back to back. I'll take that.
Based on the way this week has gone, I certainly am not going to predict a game like the Islanders or Pittsburgh. I think this team has come far enough since then to be competitive against a team like Boston. I think about the game that the Flyers played in Boston last season during that winning streak they had. Travis Sanheim scored in overtime and won.
Yep.
And that was a game. I don't remember if the Flyers. I don't think the Flyers scored first. But I do remember them. I don't believe
so, no.
But I do remember them being down 2-1 in the third period, needing a power play goal late, and they got one.
Yep.
And then won in overtime. So that's the path I see it taking. I think Boston's too good to be held down for too long. And if you get it to overtime, I think an overtime against a team like Boston, right after an overtime against a team like Toronto, is really
that's tough.
That's a tall order, But it does, I think getting the game to overtime and being able to say going into this week, 2 days off before you play Washington, that you're on a 6-game point streak with 4 wins is significant.
Yep. All right. Well,
you take a 10 out of a 12 possible points. I think you're on a roll with something, and you set yourself up for a big week coming up. Absolutely.
So, Flyers plus 1.5. You heard it here first. Bet your house on it. And if you're wrong, blame Kevin Durso at Kevin_Durso on Twitter.
There go my mentions.
You can also find the show at YWT Podcast and Mike at Mike_Giletto. Mike Sr. is also on Twitter, and I'll have Mike include his handle in the chat. I don't remember it right now, so that'll be in the description. In the meantime, you can also find the show on Facebook, Instagram, Podbean, iTunes, Google Podcast, and SportsTalkPhilly.com. Kevin, anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
Not too much. I mean, we've touched on a lot of great points this week, and, the way that this team is playing right now, there should be a lot of confidence with the way they've played. There are moments, and there are still little inconsistencies, and there's still things that frustrate you watching this team, but I think it's so far this last week, I noted it as you knew this was going to be a test. You knew that playing Toronto twice, and even, the New Jersey game was going to be coming off of 2 really bad losses, so that was going to be one where you had to come back and really have some fortitude to be a better team. And then, Toronto, Carolina, Montreal, Toronto again, Boston, Washington, Islanders coming up too.
It's time to go. Absolutely.
This is the time, not only just to say to go, but this is the time to prove yourself as a team. People, I think, are going to want to sit there and think this is still the same old Flyers. This is still a team that's going to have their inconsistencies. They can't put together a winning streak. They can't get ahead in a season. They can't do any of this. They're in a position right now where if they find let's we were talking about predictions for this game. Let's say they find a way to win this game against Boston tonight. They find a way to win this game, and
you're a player in the league.
Well, not only that, but you're at 10 wins on the season, and you're at 10 wins after 17 games, when most of the time, if you go back and go through the last decade of Flyers hockey, it's taken 22, 24, maybe 28 to get to 10 wins on the year, and you're looking at a 10-10-3 record or a 10-12-4 record or whatever. One year it was 10-10-7 or something like that. Like when they finally won their 10th win.
That was ridiculous. Oh my god.
It's stuff like that. If you come out of this and you're let's just say I personally think that the team and fans should be pleased with a 9-5-2 record at this point.
For sure.
If you're 10-5-2 at a certain point,
you're in good shape.
Well, I don't know that fans have known a team that's been 2 or 3 games above 500, legitimately 2 or 3 above 500, not even hockey 500, where we're talking
500, right?
Right, where we're talking overtime points percentage. We're talking legitimately 2 to 3 games above 500 at we keep getting very closer and closer to the quarter mark. And that Thanksgiving point. And you're getting to a point where 10-5-2 after 17 would be really a remarkable start for this team, considering some of the injuries, considering the new coaching staff and the system that had to be put into place, considering some of the losses. There have been bad ones too. I think it's fair to say that a lot of people jumped on it's the same old team again when they lose back-to-back against Calgary and Edmonton, or the blowout losses or the lopsided losses to the Islanders and to Pittsburgh. It's that same team again. I hope that the week that has been so far makes you think it might not be the same team. This team struggled against Carolina all of last season. They struggled against Toronto all of last season, and even though they lost one of those games to Toronto in a shootout, they've struggled against Toronto in terms of every single game they played against Toronto. Toronto scored 4 goals or more in every single one of those games. They scored 2 last night.
Yep.
Bit of a different story this time around, I think. So let's see what they do against Boston. Let's see what they do against Washington. This is the first time they're meeting both of those teams this season. Great way to see where they are. And same thing with the Islander game as well. The Islander game is a chance to make up for a really poor one the first time around. I think you've seen better from them since, and I think this is a chance for them to finish a week strong. Who knows? I mean, we'll see where this team is when we get to this point next week, and that it could say a lot about this team by the time we get to this point next week.
Yeah, for sure. And another litmus test of a week is ahead, and that'll do it for today's show. Kevin, it was a really good show. Thanks again for coming on.
My pleasure.
Yep. And next time, I believe we're going to have you and Mike Sr. on the same show. So
oh boy.
Next time we get you on, we're really going to throw you into the fire. I wanted 2 shows where it's just you and me. We work on the chemistry a little bit, get a little bit of a rapport. But next time you're going into the Lions Den, and Mike Sr. doesn't hold punches. So until then, follow the show, follow Kevin, follow Sports Talk Philly at Sports Talk PHL at Flyerdelphia. They tweet out our links. Show comes out every Sunday. Until next Sunday, probably going to be me, Mike Sr., maybe Dom again. Until then, we'll see you later.